Hey guys, Khraze here, welcome back to Ghost of Tsushima once more, and today let's go over one of the first builds that I played around with when I started the game. This is going to be a full samurai playthrough, by the way, so in this video I want to focus on all of the items, abilities and gear that is going to enhance that. Of course, many of these you can get very early on in the game, which is why it also makes sense to cover them in this video. So without further ado, let's jump right into it, and as always, a thumbs up on this video would be super appreciated. Nonetheless, if you've also pre-ordered the game, you're going to get a Hero of Tsushima armor set, which is absolutely amazing for the first few hours of the game, and that's mainly because it gives you a major increase to your HP as well as a moderate amount of damage reduction, which basically means you're kinda like a tank very early on in the game, and it's much better than anything else. This at the very least until you get your first armor set as a reward from one of the quests, which is the very samurai clan armor that we've seen in a ton of the promotional material. But this is something that gets rewarded to you in one of the first missions that you do with the Lady Masako. It's basically after you reach to the Golden Temple and speak with the armor over there. After you do that, you're going to see that the samurai clan armor has been given to you, and you can go ahead and immediately upgrade it. Now by default, this just gives you tanky stats, basically moderate increase to your HP as well as damage reduction, but it also gives you a nice 15% resolve when taking damage. Fully upgraded, this gives you a ton of HP and a ton of damage reduction, as well as about 30% resolve when taking damage, which means that for the majority of the early game, this is going to be amazing against literally any type of enemy. You can take blows for days, it doesn't really matter, and even if you get hit by enemies, you're going to be able to get resolve back and further heal yourself in battle just from taking damage. Now also in Act 1, you're going to get a bunch of charms, assuming that you went in and did some of that exploration, which brings us of course to some of the best charms, and quite a number of these are good up until the very end of the game, even past that. And the first one that I want to cover is the charm of Amaterasu. It's basically something that you get very early on in Act 1, but you will have to do a bit of discovery for that. So what this does is it gives you moderate healing when you kill an enemy, and since you're killing enemies left and right anyway, this means that you're constantly going to be healing. You find this in the Golden Summit Shrine. It's basically slightly to the southeast of the Golden Temple that I've just mentioned, but otherwise there's a bunch of other charms in there that I also really enjoy. And the second one also for the main slot is the charm of Mitsunokami, also something that you get very early on in chapter 1. So this makes parries, perfect parries and perfect dodges easier to perform by basically increasing the time window for these parries and the dodges. While it doesn't fully trivialize the combat even on the higher difficulties, it does make it much easier because now your time window to react is much higher. You can basically see an enemy attack incoming and your time window to react is going to be like much greater. Not really sure exactly how much greater, but it definitely feels like it's a huge improvement. To get this, you're going to have to head over to the Springfall Shrine, which is located in the Komora region in the upper section of the map that you get to explore in Act 1. Here you're going to see that there's a couple of waterfalls as well as a nice lake over there in the middle, and you're going to have to reach the shrine by going on the road on the left side that reaches kind of like behind some of these waterfalls. It's also a little bit more complicated than the other shrines that you might get to explore in the early game, because you can also fall down if you're not being careful, but otherwise it shouldn't take you too long to reach the top and finally get the charm of Mitsunokami. But otherwise it's very powerful. As I've said, for a samurai gameplay, this is perfect for that, since you're going to be constantly out in the open trying to parry, dodge and perfect parry incoming attacks, and this basically makes that so much easier. For a ghost gameplay, I don't really think that you're going to make too much out of it. You're going to want to stay in stealth mode and not be detected, and there are other like major charms that you might want to use with that sort of gameplay, but for samurai this is like the perfect setup. This also brings us to the other couple of minor charms that you might also want to unlock. By far my favorites in the early game were the charms of dual destructions. There are two separate levels for these. There's level 1 and level 2. Level 1 gives you only 5% chance to deal double damage, while level 2 gives you 10% chance to deal double damage. And yes, if you were wondering, you can stack multiple of these. So for example, 2 level 1s, 2 level 2s, or 1 level 1 and 1 level 2. But basically this is something that you usually get from the quest line from Lady Masako. Basically on on the third one in the sequence, you're going to get level 1 Charm of Destruction, and then number 8 you're going to get Charm of Destruction level 2, but there's other side quests that might reward you these as well, and by the end of the game you're going to get multiple of these anyway. But otherwise I really enjoy these. It's kind of like a bit of RNG, but it also brings the fun out of this build because you're going to strike enemies a lot of times with your sword. You're going to do that constantly, and there's a chance to deal double damage, and when it does happen it's just awesome to basically deal the equivalent of 2 swings into 1 single damage. And again, the further you upgrade your build, the further you're going to deal more damage, and you're going to just take down enemies really fast. Anyway, this brings us to the actual skills and how you're going to want to use them, and of course it's definitely suggested to invest as many points as possible into both deflection and evasion up until you have the maximum of them. I also suggest doing that Heavenly Strike mission I've talked about in yesterday's video, since it also gives you access to one of the first legendary attacks, which is the Heavenly Strike. Very useful, and it just like deals a ton of damage. It also terrifies further the enemies, so you already have like a ton of terrifies just from these two alone. But this also brings us to that mechanic I've also talked about in yesterday's video, which is the standoff, and you're going to want to go ahead and invest as many points as possible up until you have fully upgraded this. I think that you're going to need about 3 skill points in total in order to unlock all of these to the maximum of 3 standoff enemies that you can go ahead and face. But if you want to upgrade this even further and make it even more powerful, then you're also going to want to unlock the armor set called the Sakai Clan armor, because this is actually the perfect fit for this build, but you only unlock this in Act 2 in the beginning from one of the missions called Ghosts from the Past. It's something that you cannot miss, but it does take a bit of time to travel to it, since it's kinda like in the middle of the second map that you get to unlock. But otherwise this gives you more balanced stats, because on top of giving you like a massive health increase, it also gives you a major increase to melee damage, as well as a hefty boost to not just standoff streak by 2, but also a 20% chance to terrify nearby enemies if you win the standoffs, assuming of course that you've upgraded to the maximum level. But if you do that, this is going to enable the build even more. It's all around amazing to go in, start a standoff with a group of enemies. You can take up to 5 enemies in just one single standoff, and if there's anything left around them, they are more than often going to be terrified by all of the terrified effects that we have on the gear right here. And not just that, if you happen to go in with like a low HP, you can easily heal during battle, because you also have the charms of Amaterasu, and after the battle it's also very easy to like kind of parry and dodge incoming attacks because of that other charm I was talking about. And again, just double damage all the way, a ton of other cool stuff and gimmicks to make this build really awesome and basically make it shine very early on in the game. But anyway, this is it. There's of course other armor sets in the game that are fitted for other types of combat gameplay, but I'm gonna cover that in different videos. As always, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to comment, like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.